Excellence, le deuxième vice-président du Parlement panafricain, le président du Parlement panafricain dans cet atelier. Excellence, la troisième vice-présidente du Parlement panafricain, honorables parlementaires, distingués invités experts, Mesdames, Messieurs, secrétaire général et secrétaire général adjoint du Parlement panafricain, Excellences, tous les hauts cadres du Parlement panafricain et staff, journalistes, interprètes, bon après-midi. Et c'est un grand honneur et un privilège pour moi, au nom de la Commission des affaires juridiques et des droits de l'homme, de me tenir devant vous pour modérer cette séance. Et comme vous l'avez constaté, même moi et les autres qui vont intervenir, nous allons essayer de nous inscrire dans le défi que nous avons rencontré du temps, parce que, comme vous l'avez vu, on avait un grand travail ce matin. Comme on devait bien faire le travail, on devait bien affiner notre travail de ce matin. Le temps a été un peu à côté de notre volonté. Et sans trop tarder alors, je vais vous présenter, vous avez déjà le programme. J'espère qu'on vous a donné le programme. Sans trop tarder, comme vous le savez, ce sujet, c'est un sujet qui préoccupe tout le monde, tous les Africains, mais aussi, on ne peut pas l'ignorer, d'autres coins du monde. Parce que, avec l'esclavage, avec la colonisation, l'Afrique a connu beaucoup de dégâts. Les dégâts qui nous ont fait perdre beaucoup de temps, beaucoup de choses, parce que l'Afrique devrait évoluer, n'eût été la spoliation de ces intellectuels, de ces hommes forts qui avaient la capacité de travailler pour l'Afrique. C'est pourquoi alors, l'Union africaine, en emboîtant le pas à nos anciens dirigeants africains qui avaient commencé à demander des réparations, lui aussi a voulu nous mettre ensemble pour que nous puissions continuer à débattre d'une seule voix, pour que nous puissions les cramer avec force les réparations aux dommages causés à nos peuples et à notre continent. Sans trop tarder alors, nous allons suivre le discours de bienvenue qui sera prononcé par la troisième vice-présidente du Parlement panafricain. Oui, on va faire on va directement ouvrir notre atelier par le deuxième vice-président de notre Parlement. Excellence, vous êtes invité à prononcer votre discours d'ouverture.
Your Excellency, Lady Justice, Imani Abadi, Judge President of the African Court, the Vice President of Pan-African Parliament, Honorable Lucia, Honorable First Vice President, I think he is not in the chamber, Dr. Beryl Baikaman, Board Chairperson, African Union, African Diaspora, 6th Region High Council, Dr. Tamaneta Kennedy, Commissioner, African Diaspora Development Agency, honorable members of Pan-African Parliament, representatives of African Union Commission, Ms. Lindwe Kumalo, Clerk of the Pan-African Parliament, Deputy Clerk of Pan-African Parliament, Mr. Gali, representatives of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation of Republic of South Africa, distinguished invited guests, members of media, staff of the Pan-African Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends. I stand before you today riddled with the emotion as we seek to address what should be a painful and emotive topic to all of us, the African Union's theme of the year, justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. This theme, which touches on our very livelihoods, where we have come from, where we are heading, is not merely a statement of purpose, it is an urgent call to action, a powerful reminder of the collective struggle we must continue to wage for justice, healing and redress for the historical injustice that have been inflicted upon the African continent and the global African diaspora. Our gathering today occurs against the backdrop of the centuries of the exploitation through the transatlantic slave trade, colonization, apartheid, and other modes of systemic discrimination, and have ravaged the African people, both on the continental and across the diaspora. This injustice, though deeply rooted in history, continue to have profound impact on the lives of millions of Africans and people of African descent. The consequences of these historical wrongs are visible today in the form of the persistent poverty, inequality, social marginalization, and economic underdevelopment that continue to plague African communities, both in Africa and through the world. The call for reparations, therefore, not more rhetoric, but it's fundamental human rights issue. Reparations represent not only a moral obligation to redress the historic harm suffered by our people, but also a legal and ethical responsibility borne by those who were complicit in the perpetrating this injustice. For centuries, African people were subjected to the brutalities of the transatlantic slave trade, colonization, and apartheid, while the wealth and resources of our nations were plundered, and the very essence of our cultural identities were systematically erased or diminished. It is incumbent upon us, therefore, as the leaders and representatives of African continent and its people, to assert that justice for Africans and people of African descent cannot be achieved without reparations. This is not merely a question of financial compensation. It is a call to address the deep scars that have been inflicted upon our people through the dehumanizing system of slavery, colonization, and apartheid. Reparations must encompass the full range of restorative measures, including but not limited to financial restorations, land restorations, educational opportunities, and cultural recognitions. It is important to underscore that the financial compensation, while vital, is not the sole element of what must be a comprehensive reparations framework. Reparations must take into account a range of restorative practices that aim to heal not just the material losses, but also the psychological, cultural, and the spiritual wounds inflicted by the centuries of oppressions. We must therefore advocate for cultural restorations. The cultural historic heritage of African people was systematically destroyed or suppressed during the colonial era. Reparations must involve the restorations of cultural artifacts, the presentation and the promotion of African language, and the recognition of African traditions, customs, and identities that were so brutally marginalized. Land and resource redistribution. The exploitation of Africans' natural resources during the colonial period has left the continent impoverished and the resources stripped. Restoration must involve the return of land and to communities that were disposed, and the creation of policies that empower African people to control their own resources, ensuring that they can build sustainable economic futures. Educational equity. The denial of quality education to Africans and people of African descent has had long-lasting consequences, leaving generations without the tools for the self-determinations. As Winston Rodney stated in his seminal work, How Europe Underdeveloped. The colonial education system was education for subordination, exploitation, the creation of mineral confiscations, and the development of underdevelopment. Reparations must therefore include educational reforms that provide equitable access to quality, relevant education, scholarship programs for African students, and the development of institutions of higher learning that focus on the African heritage, culture, and knowledge systems. Social and political empowerment. Reparation should also include efforts to dismantle the structures of the inequality that continue to marginalize African communities worldwide. This includes addressing the diasporas in healthcare, employment, political representations, and ensuring that African peoples have the tools to assert their political and social agency on the global stage. The issue of repatriation is not one that can be addressed by any one nation, organization, or individual alone. This is a global struggle that requires the full mobilization of all African states, the African Union, international institutions, civil society organizations, and the African diaspora. The Pan-African Parliament stands as a unified voice in the critical discourse, advocating for the full recognition of the harms inflicted upon African peoples and demanding tangible representations as matter of justice and human rights. As we embark on this workshop, let's recognize that the struggle for reparations is not going to be walk in the park. Now, from its firstly, Africa needs to come up with solid legal frameworks for repatriations that can withstand any legal challenge in any court of law. Secondly, Africa also needs to come up with the credible mechanism for quantifying the repatriations. How are they going to be measured? How do you quantify 400 years of the slavery, and what is due to Africa? How do you measure the psychological impact of apartheid, which are still being felt today? This is not simply a legal or economic issue. It is a moral one. And it is imperative that we come up with a credible process that will guarantee success in our quest for the repatriations. As a legislative body of the African Parliament, African continent, the Pan-African Parliament has a critical role to play in advancing the cause of repatriations. We are tasked with crafting policies and legislative frameworks that can hold accountable those who are responsible for the injustice of the past. We must continue to advocate for the inclusion of the repatriations in all AU legal frameworks, and we must ensure that repatriations become an integral part of international law. We must work to engage African governments, regional bodies, international organizations, and more importantly, the people of Africa in dialogue, urging them to take concrete steps to advocate repatriations on the global stage. The Pan-African Parliament should serve as a platform for the African Union to collectively advocate for the repatriations, ensuring that our voices are heard and our demands for justice are acted again. In conclusion, this workshop should not simply be an academic exercise. It must, to all intents and purpose, be turning point in our collective struggle for the justice and dignity. The work we do today, the discussions we have, and the resolutions we pass must shape the future of the repatriations agenda. It is our responsibility to ensure that the legacy of this moment is one of the action, accountability, and lasting change. I wish you fruitful deliberations and I declare this workshop is open. Thank you. May I ask Her Excellency, Third Vice President, to moderate this meeting? May you assume your position, seat, please.
Muito obrigada, Sr. Vice-Presidente e Substituição do Presidente. Obrigada pelas palavras aqui proferidas. Cumprimento o Sr. Presidente da Comissão de Justiça e Direitos Humanos. Muito boa tarde a todas e a todos, portanto, os nossos palestrantes que vieram de diferentes pontos do globo. Temos aqui a nossa diáspora. Temos também representantes da Comissão da União Africana, temos os nossos experts e também o nosso secretariado que vai nos acompanhar neste momento que vamos iniciar a apresentação dos painéis. Sem muita consideração em relação ao tema, eu queria apenas aqui realçar que neste momento temos uma oportunidade ímpar para o Parlamento Pan-Africano, um momento que nos interpela para a justiça e a solidariedade intergeracional. O que nós estamos a falar de coisas que aconteceram não a nós, mas de coisas que aconteceram, portanto, a outras gerações. E nós, neste momento, temos a responsabilidade de trabalhar para reaver aquilo que são os nossos direitos que foram violados. Sabemos que há valores que não podemos recuperar, que temos, portanto, perdas emocionais, temos perdas humanas, que não se pode ser, portanto, recuperado, mas esta geração, a nossa geração, este Parlamento, e toda a equipa da diáspora aqui presente e os que nos acompanham têm a responsabilidade neste momento de traçar mecanismo que permita que a nova geração não passe pela mesma situação que os nossos antepassados viveram. E nós, enquanto líderes políticos, somos chamados a criar mecanismo que promovam o desenvolvimento inclusivo, desenvolvimento sustentável, para reter os nossos jovens nos nossos respectivos países, porque estamos, neste momento, com uma nova forma de colonização. Estamos com uma forma de colonização inteligente, que é incentivar a nossa diáspora, portanto, os nossos jovens, os nossos cérebros, os quadros formados aqui na África, para irem trabalhar nos países dos nossos ex-colonizadores, e com isso vamos perder a nossa capacidade de inovar, a nossa capacidade de ter jovens com emprego digno nos nossos respectivos países, e será, portanto, uma mão de obra qualificada a ser retirada do nosso continente, e vamos continuar na dependência de todos os serviços, e vamos continuar sem quadros para acelerarmos o processo da industrialização do nosso continente, da transformação da agricultura, para termos uma educação de qualidade e a saúde de qualidade para todos. Por isso, somos exortados neste momento, enquanto políticos, a sermos proativos, a criarmos mecanismos de desenvolvimento que permita que tudo que seja recuperado desta justiça ou da injustiça sofrida pelos nossos antepassados seja aplicado de uma forma responsável, que promova o desenvolvimento inclusivo e sustentável do nosso continente. De manhã, vice-presidente da Comissão da União Africana lembrou-nos de que cerca de 89 bilhões de dólares anualmente sai do continente de uma forma ilícita. E esses recursos poderiam ser aqui aplicados no continente. E quando estamos a falar da justiça reparadora, nós vamos recuperar valores dos nossos ex-colonizadores. Se nós não temos uma política de luta contra a corrupção, o que é que vamos fazer com o que vamos recuperar, portanto, para repor essa justiça? São questões que nos interpelam e que vamos, portanto, durante esta tarde, debater com todos os presentes e, portanto, tirar as ilações que se impõem, porque nós precisamos também refletir sobre a reparação da justiça interna a nível do continente e a nível dos nossos Estados-membros. Portanto, sem mais delongas, vou passar a palavra à nossa primeira apresentadora. Eu tenho dificuldade em pronunciar o nome, vou dizer Madame Inke, se está errado, peço desculpa, Coleman, para aqui fazer a apresentação, portanto, do tema que ele é confiado. Tenha bondade. Pode vir usar aqui o pódio. Pode ser aqui no púlpito. Para poder ficar de frente para os deputados. Vous avez 15 minutes pour votre présentation. 15 minutes, ok? Eu peço à apresentadora que faça uma pequena apresentação, tendo em conta que nós não recebemos, portanto, os CV, para que as pessoas saibam quem está aqui conosco a partilhar este painel. Portanto, se pudesse, em resumo, abordar um pouco do seu CV, nós agradeceríamos.
Good afternoon, and please permit me to stand on all existing protocols. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished parliamentarians, my name is Angela Na Afole Udai. I am the head of Diaspora Division at the Citizens and Diaspora Organizations Directorate, short form CIDO, at the African Union Commission. I deem it a great honor to be here before you all to present to you the concept note and then the roadmap on the theme of the year, which speaks on justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. I'll take you quickly through a few historical antecedents for us to set the pace, and then we run along with this presentation. So as previous speakers have mentioned, reparations have always been part of us. It's been reparations and reparatory justice have been part of us as a result of the various gruesome errors that Africa experienced with historical crimes, mass atrocities, issues of slavery, colonialism, neocolonialism, issues of apartheid, genocide, so on and so forth. And these formed one of the key items or defining moments within the Organization of African Unity, now the African Union, which has been actually something that has been pursued since 1963. Over the past 3 decades, the AU has made several decisions and supported several initiatives when it comes to the issue of promoting justice and reparations for Africans and restitution of cultural artifacts that were looted during the era of colonialism and slavery. The Continental Movement for Reparations in Africa traces its roots to political activism during the national liberation campaigns, which, among which we noted that Chief Monshola Abiola of Nigeria was very active in this. This actually led to the 1992 establishment of a group of eminent persons, a 12-member group, which were brought from all over Africa, which sought to develop the political agenda and set the tone for reparations and issues or the impacts of the transatlantic slave trade, slavery, colonialism, neocolonialism, amongst others. Now, this actually led to the first Pan-African Conference on Reparations held in April 1993 in Abuja, Nigeria, that resulted in the proclamation, Abuja Proclamation on Reparations. Now, this particular proclamation revitalized the reparatory movement, and then it ensured that it marked the first unified stance by African political leaders to take a step further on this momentum on reparations. It again reiterated the harm caused and endured by people of African descent and all Africans, and it actually continued as well to speak on the enduring harm that is being caused globally, all in the sense of, for example, issues of systemic racism. This called upon the international community to acknowledge that there's a moral debt that needs to be paid to Africans and people of African descent as a result of the centuries of exploitation and humiliation that is endured by the normal African or people of African descent. So the African Union then again worked hand in hand with the UN and ensured that we played an active role as we joined the United Nations at the World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance in Durban, South Africa in 2001. There was a declaration made in Durban which recognized slavery, including the transatlantic slave trade, as crimes against humanity with ongoing consequences for Africans and all people of African descent. And permit me to use the word diaspora, because per the African Union definition of diaspora, it is anyone of African descent living outside of the continent who, irrespective of their citizenship or naturalization, has the willingness to engage with the Union or with the continent. So now, the Durban Declaration again called for justice, protection, and reparations for victims of these historical injustices. Now, there was a Continental Experts Workshop in Dakar, Senegal, during another theme of the Year of the African Union, which was championed by the Division of Culture, which actually organized a Continental Experts Workshop focusing on restitution of cultural property and heritage. This workshop aimed to develop a common African paper and a framework for action and negotiations for the return of our cultural properties which are outside of the continent. The workshop also sought to facilitate networking amongst African cultural experts, policymakers, auctioneers, and museum curators to combat illicit trafficking of cultural property. I'll quickly take you through a journey from the Accra Summit to the court in Arusha. So now, to further advance this unified approach to reparations, we had the Accra Summit 1, which is the Africa Diaspora Summit on Reparations that was held in Ghana in 2022. This was organized by the government of Ghana, the Africa Transitional Justice Legacy Fund, and other partners, and the summit focused on advancing justice, reparations, and racial healing. The Accra Declaration introduced racial healing into the reparations discourse highlighting the need for multi-generational, transnational engagement, and then to address the systemic harm against Africans and people of African descent. In November 2022, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights adopted a resolution on Africa's reparations agenda and the human rights of Africans in the diaspora and people of African descent worldwide. This leads to CEDAW taking up the role and coordinating issues when it comes to this. So there was an assembly decision in 2023, decision 847, during the 36th ordinary session of the Assembly of the African Union, that sought, amongst other things, to actually build a common front for the payment of justice and the payment of, for the cost of justice and payment of reparations to Africans. This was endorsed by heads of states because, as a result of the proposal that Ghana made on this decision. So the Assembly was also directed, amongst others, the Commission to work in consultation with relevant stakeholders such as organs such as the PAP, ECOSOC, amongst others, the courts, amongst others, and then even CARICOM, to ensure that we collaborate effectively, we are able to put together a common position paper with the committee of experts, and then we are able to have a joint mechanism with CARICOM again, for example, because they have a 10-point plan. They have advanced considerably when it comes to the issue of reparations, working together with them and then making sure that we contextualize it to suit that of Africa and its diaspora. Following this decision, a high-level AU delegation conducted a study tour to Barbados in July 2023 to strengthen AU CARICOM cooperation on reparations and racial healing. This initiative was conducted by the African Union ECOSOC in partnership with the University of West Indies, the Open Society Foundation, and the government of Barbados to deepen collaboration, understanding of reparations, and then us to understand the various contexts available and a deeper understanding of strategies with which we could champion this reparations movement. This segued into the Accra Reparations Conference and its subsequent proclamation, which is the Accra Proclamation, which happened in November 2023. Now, beyond this, there was another decision that sought to implement, build on the decision 847 to implement the decision on reparations. In view of that, the 37th ordinary session of the African Union, Assembly of the African Union, adopted the decision 884 and designated the theme of the year to be justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. The decision, amongst others, appointed the President of Ghana as the African Union leader on advancing the cause of justice and payment of reparations to Africans. The decision again requested for the institutionalization of reparations through proposed mechanisms, which include the establishment of the Committee of Experts who would work on the common African position and then subsequently work on the joint mechanism for us to be able to chart the way forward on the reparations agenda. Then, two, a reference group of legal experts who would, one, advise the Commission and then advise the African Union leader as well, guide appropriately on various legal instruments and mechanisms and pathways through which we can chart the claims that we want to chart going forward. Then we have the Africa Global Reparations Fund, which we seek to ensure, which will be based in Africa for us to ensure that we put in requisite and the necessary funding needed for us to be able to roll out our agenda on reparations at the continental level, regional level, and then national levels appropriately. Then we have the Transcontinental Partnership Framework, which discusses not only the CARICOM, but it speaks to the UN Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, for example, the UN Working Group of Experts for People of African Descent, among other stakeholders that we aim to work together with in order for our voices to be heard on the international level and for us to gain that which we are seeking. Subsequently, in July 2024, we had an Executive Council decision 1267, which sought to the adoption of the year 2025 as, and emphasized the implementation of Decision 884. So now, this particular Executive Council decision has two main things. It serves as a critical steps for us to pursue justice and healing for Africans and people of African descent. And then it reiterates the call for accountability for historical crimes and mass atrocities caused against Africans and the global African diaspora. It requested for member states to launch the theme of the year in their respective countries and then called upon them to implement most of the decisions that we have outlined once it can be contextualized to suit the nation state for them to be able to implement them at the national level. It as well directed the Commission, AU organs, regional economic communities, permanent representatives of member states, specialized technical offices to mainstream reparatory justice and racial healing in their programs and support the implementation of the theme of the year, to which I must actually commend the Pan-African Parliament because this is the second experience I have had with you on the theme of the year and you mainstreaming it. Thank you. Now, a key strategic, we have the roadmap has 6 key strategic entry points. It's one, we look at it strengthening the AU institutional frameworks and establishing the necessary mechanisms to ensure sustainability of the Africa reparations agenda. In view of this, there is the need, the decision stipulates that we should, or the Commission should, carry out an assessment on the legal, structural, and political financial implications of the 5 mechanisms and present it during the July Media Coordination meeting. Then the second one is to be to enhance the capacity of member states, regional economic communities to mainstream reparations into their developmental policies, programs, and strategies. The third is to promote and coordinate AU-wide and global diaspora engagement through dialogues. Then there's the need for us to develop knowledge products across all levels and collaborate with universities, academia, think tanks to ensure that all levels of society understand and appreciate why the need for reparations and then be able to join us together for us to move this agenda forward. Then there's the need for us to strengthen multi-sectorial and multi-stakeholder partnerships and embark on resource mobilization. So CEDAW has an oversight and a coordination role in establishing all these 6 mechanisms. Now, when it comes to the Pan-African Parliament, there are a few commitments that was set across. So far as the theme of the year is concerned, is the development and the adoption of a model law to ensure that we know the parameters through which our reparations agenda is moving, and then what does it actually mean to us? What are some of the legal entry points that we could actually navigate and then move on with our agenda in recognition for the international community to recognize, acknowledge, and then be able to actually own up to the responsibility of paying for reparations. Then advocacy, the second one is advocate for the return of cultural artifacts and human remains. And there are sessions that have been earmarked to be able to actually run this agenda forward, whereby we are expecting, the Pan-African Parliament has outlined that it would ensure that reparations is in its various sessions going forward. Then the hosting of a global diaspora summit and diaspora high-level dialogues. Then the strengthening of legal frameworks for reparations jointly with the Banjul Commission and then the African Court in Arusha. Then to mainstream the theme of the year in both the plenary and relevant committees of the PAP, and then capacity building sessions for members of parliament to enable them streamline what they've learned into practice once they get home. Then the mobilization of youth and grassroots. I thank you.
Muito obrigada, senhora Ângela Ofley Odai, pela apresentação do roteiro e também do documento síntese que permitiu a preparação do tema do ano. Nós agradecemos a sua apresentação e convidamos a retomar o seu lugar. Agora convidamos a segunda apresentadora, que é, portanto, a conselheira do Gabinete do Presidente da Comissão da União Africana, a senhora Adoa Coleman, para fazer a apresentação. Tem 10 minutos. Eu peço a colaboração de todos os apresentadores, porque eu estou com um papel muito ingrato. Temos pouco tempo, fomos informados que às 18 horas haverá corte de energia, porque é um problema técnico, então não vamos poder continuar os trabalhos. Para permitir que todos os apresentadores possam partilhar conosco aquilo que prepararem para esta conferência, então vamos ter que cortar no tempo da apresentação para permitir aos deputados fazer a interação convosco, de colocarem as questões. Portanto, tem 10 minutos e convido, portanto, a usar a palavra. Muito obrigada.
Honorable President of the Pan-African Parliament, members of the Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament, Chairperson of the Justice Committee of the Pan-African Parliament, honorable members of Parliament, fellow panelists, and all, ladies and gentlemen, and all other protocols observed. It is my understanding, or it was my understanding until some moments ago, that I was supposed to make a presentation on the historical roots of the call for reparations. It would appear that my colleague here has covered some of it, so I hope you will understand if I try to cover what I think is still outstanding. My name is Adjoa Coleman. I'm an advisor to the chairperson of the African Union Commission. I represent that office here. In fact, I've been expressly authorized or tasked to present the office to make the presentation today. We in the chairperson's office and the commission at large are extremely grateful for the invitation that we've received from the Parliament to attend this event, which provides the whole of the African Union, including its 6th region, yet another opportunity to work together to make this year's observance of the theme of the year a resounding success. In fact, we hope it will be a success such as has never been seen before in preceding years. Madam Chairman, or Chairperson, the reason why we believe that this will be a resonating or resounding success is that for the first time ever, we have brought together, in the context of a roadmap, contributions and programs that virtually all the organs of the African Union. And I can name them. The Commission in Banjul, the Court in Arusha, the Committee on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, the NEPAD, the APRM, the African Union Commission on International Law. All of them have made contributions, and as well as PAP, of course, and all of them have made contributions to this particular roadmap. Now, the pivotal role that the Parliament is expected to play should be underlined because the concept of reparations is one that is linked to the development of the African people, and the Pan-African Parliament is definitely one of those organs that has the mandate to provide for the development of our people. It is also ironic, perhaps not ironic, but significant, that of all the organs in the African Union, it is only the Pan-African Parliament that has the prefix Pan-African to it. So that should tell us something. Honorable Chairperson, until 2022, when the Commission, through the Chairperson's office, reached out to the government of Ghana to assist the Commission in escalating the subject of reparations to the highest level of the African Union, the Assembly, the campaign for reparations had faltered. And the face of reparations on the continent actually was that of the campaign for the return of African objects and treasures and so on. It was when this démarche was made and this escalation of the subject matter to the Assembly played out that we began to see a revival in the fortunes of the campaign for reparations. And this was fed by the outrage that was provoked by the murder of George Floyd and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. The African Union first seized the resurgence in the interest in reparations by adopting landmark decisions. These decisions were adopted by the Assembly, and they are 847 and 884, which together required all the organs of the African Union to work together. In between these two decisions, we had the Accra Proclamation, which in a sense is the successor of the Abuja Proclamation, which was adopted in 1993 under the auspices of the OAU. These are the fundamental legal sources. You may call them soft law, if you will. These are the basic sources for going forward in our campaign for reparations. And what they have done together is to open the space for a continent-wide campaign which brings together not only the organs, but the governments, the parliaments, the civil societies, RECs, the 6th region, and all other stakeholders. But there are even more older sources of the campaign for reparations. For example, there is, I'm speaking not from a script, I'm speaking straight from the heart. There are, for example, certain legal texts that are as old as the Midrand text that was adopted by the Malian nation or empire of the Mandingo. And this particular text, it was promulgated in the 13th century, and it laid down a law against slavery. We can also mention that as far back as 1684, a case was brought against the Vatican court. In those days, the Vatican court was very much alive. It was brought by a member of the then royal family of the Congo Kingdom in present-day Angola. He sued for the abolition of slavery, and he won his case. And that really was a landmark case. I can also mention that in the context of North African jurisprudence, the first decree in Islamic Africa was issued by a ruler in Tunis called Ahmed Bey. He abolished the slave trade in that respect. So this goes to illustrate that even before the abolition of slavery was sought by Europe, we in Africa had our own sources of law that proscribed slavery. When I come to the phase of colonialism, we can say the same. When I come to the post-colonial period, I'm trying to summarize. When we come to the post-colonial period, we can say the same thing. We can say that there are texts, there are sources of law which prescribe slavery, colonialism, and address this issue of neocolonialism. Thus, for example, in the post-colonial era, we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which the African the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which made reference to the original OAU Charter, and then talked about the need for us as a continent to address these issues. Since then, of course, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights has adopted a number of instruments that are a source for our movement or our pursuit of reparations. They have, the African Charter, in fact, described slavery as a crime against humanity. The World Conference the World Conference, which was held in Durban, also made reference to reparations being a crime against humanity. So we already have these sources that are our foundation for our campaign against reparations. Now, I want to look at the other part of what I was asked to do, which was to explore the lasting effects of colonialism and slavery on African societies. And in the limited time that I have, what I can say is that really we have to look at the continuum of imperialism. We have slavery, we have colonialism, and we have neocolonialism. And what has happened is that the injustices that were perpetrated in the period of slavery, and those that were perpetrated also in the period of colonialism, continue in another form. So efforts have been made by the member states of the Union, by the Union itself, and our allies in the global South to try and modernize or should I say reform, the international economic and political orders. And in this respect, we even have a common African position adopted by the African Union on the issue of the reform of the international political order, which will see more justice in the operation or functioning of the United Nations Security Council. We have also organized ourselves and come up with common decisions which require the perpetrators of slavery, colonialism, and neocolonialism to consider the reform of the international economic order, which exists in terms of the structures of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, because the current international economic order in particular, especially when you look in the context of the debt, of the debt situation, the constraints, the other constraints that hamper the development agenda of our member states, dictates that we look at how we can reform. It dictates, it exemplifies the need for us to reform these international economic structures. It is the former enslavers, it is the former colonizers who continue to hold a stranglehold on our, exercise a stranglehold on our development efforts. Madam Chairman, I wish I could say much more, and but well, let's leave it at that. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, Senhora Conselheira, por ter colaborado conosco na utilização do tempo, mas, sobretudo, por partilhar conosco aqui todo o processo, o roteiro, portanto, que mostra quais são os órgãos e as agências da União Africana que estão envolvidos nesta campanha, as sinergias que devem ser criadas na implementação da campanha, em termos, portanto, do aproveitamento dos recursos a nível das agências e dos órgãos da União Africana, o envolvimento dos Estados-membros e da sociedade civil, e também por ter partilhado conosco textos jurídicos. It's fine. C'est bon?
Sorry.
No translate?
Madam Chairman, did you ask me a question? No. Okay.
Não, estou a fazer, portanto, o resumo da sua intervenção para poder passar para o tema seguinte. Portanto, como eu estava a dizer, também partilhou conosco textos jurídicos do período pós-colonialismo, e falando aqui da Carta Africana para os Direitos Humanos e dos Povos. Também falou aqui, portanto, da posição comum da União Africana no Conselho de Segurança das Nações Unidas, e ainda também falou da questão da dívida dos países membros, o que acaba por impedir o desenvolvimento dos Estados-membros, porque o que se está a fazer a nível tanto do FMI como do Banco Mundial acaba por levar os Estados-membros sempre à dependência de financiamento, o que é uma nova forma de colonização. Então, é preciso fazer a reforma das instituições financeiras, e a nível da África é preciso ter instituições financeiras fortes que permita, portanto, os Estados-membros terem acesso ao financiamento para a implementação dos seus programas de desenvolvimento. Neste momento, vou passar a palavra ao terceiro orador, portanto, o Dr. Kennedy Tomenta, que é, portanto, comissário da Agência de Desenvolvimento da Diaspora Africana. Tenha bondade e tem 10 minutos. Portanto, eu peço encarecidamente que use apenas 10 minutos. Vous avez seulement 10 minutes, il faut utiliser ce temps-là pour ne pas m'obliger de vous couper la parole. Je compte avec vous. Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I build on the previous protocol, and since I have 12 minutes, I will just try to rush through my presentation. In fact, my presentation is geared towards finding an integrated framework to accelerate the process of reparation through diaspora's diplomacy. I think I want to thank the presentation from the previous speakers. I think Sister Angela gave a brief overview and the multifaceted instrument that has been put in place by the commissions and the African Union structures to make sure that we can finally get to our final destination, making sure that reparation gets in. So I will be focusing more on diaspora's diplomacy. And I want to show what we have been able to do during the past years. And what is clear from the presentation that we had since this morning is that reparation is not just financial compensation, it encompassed justice, healing, and restoration. And we have seen different presentations that touches a lot on the cultural dislocation, social, political inequalities, and the disproportionate burden of climate. I'm bringing in the issue of climate change because if you look at the burden that climate change brings on us, African and people of African descent, then you understand that we have to look at reparation from multifaceted and multidimensional area. So we have seen that the knowledge we have to, if we want to achieve reparations, we need to have formal recognition that is being set. We have restitutions of artifacts, lands and resources, rehabilitations. And here we talk about investment in education, healthcare, infrastructure, and cultural preservation. Madam Chair, you have, since Senegal, always mentions the devastating part of a neo-colonial pattern that is taking away most of our children. We call it a new disguised form of enslavement, where our best brain of young people are being given opportunities, incentive to leave the continent where they find themselves out there in the diasporas. The second part is that as they go to the diasporas, I'm talking about the 21st century diaspora, we see that most of these young people, they don't have tied back to the continent. I mean, the little children that are delivered, they have no relationship back to the continent. That is why many 21st century national diasporas are now seeing that when they pass away, they are incriminated and their children are never connected to the continent. So while we talk about the historical diasporas, we talk about the 19th century and 21st century diasporas, there is another generation that were delivered there that had nothing to do with the continent, only their parents had interest to do with the diaspora. So what I will be presenting is how can we harness the competencies of these people to play a vital role as we forge ahead for reparation, restitution, rehabilitations, and guarantee that these things will never happen again. So, of course, the goal of the goal of reparatory justice for us is that we need to have a common narrative. So the issue here is not to repeat what we ought to do, but how are we going to do that? And who is going to do what? And who pays for it? Because we know that finance is a bigger problem in financing Africa's institutions, the African Union, the Pan-African Parliament. All of us know, if you look at the chairs in the morning, sometimes nation states do not have the finances to be able to finance parliamentarians to get here. And if we have to go for reparation and restitution, how do we finance ourselves, become independent, and make sure that we can ask the perpetrator to give what actually belongs to us? So these are the real discussions that we should be having. And I will be able to touch some of the points, how we, the diasporas, can do that. Madam Chair, as the African Union goes up and say, hey, we want to be on the table on multilateralism, we have a new political reality of nationalism. Not because nationalism is important, because the population, the demographic dividend, the influence of Africans and African diasporas is now changing the whole dynamic in national parliaments around the world. But now we have to look for another way. Nationalism, not because they want to preserve their country, because they have seen the inherent danger found in them. So, Madam Chair, we have to figure out a new shift. A shift in multilateralism with states, meaning that we build relationship with states. It doesn't function. If building relationship with states with unequal, parallel dynamics will not work. That is why the Pan-African Parliament, as well as the African Union institution, has to move away from multilateralism, where we build a lobbying and figure out how we work together with states. We will never be given that chance, because if they give us the chance, we will control the global institution. That is why we have to get a paradigm shift, a change in power dynamic, and we need a paradigm shift to what is called multilateralism with people of African origin. Meaning that instead of building with states, that you will be asking them to compensate, you have to build with people. That is why the states of CARICOM stands a bigger chance on the state level. The second part will be to harness the potentials of people of African origins, and that is why we are submitting that we need to bring a lot of resources to the Citizens and Diasporas Commission of the African Union to make sure that we equip them with the necessary resources as they go around to mobilize the diasporas together, as we did since 2008, following the regional consultative process. Secondly, as we go for this paradigm shift, we are already waiting for you. Look at these numbers. We have 1.7 billion Africans and people of African origin already there. They're talking about 1.2 billion Africans and so on. We already have 1.7 billion. If you look at the combined numbers, we have 1.5 billion on the continent, which is only 50%, because when Article 3 cure was enacted, most countries, even though most of them didn't even care of ratifying it, they spend a lot of time reporting to CEDAW and other commissions of what they have done for their national diaspora. They have created Ministry of Diasporas, they have created institutions for diasporas to attract their national diasporas. But if you look at the statistics here, you see that we have approximately 250 million other Africans living out of the continent, because the definition of African diasporas are people of African origin, independent of their current nationality, who are currently living out of the continent and who are willing to contribute to the development of an integrated Africa and its diaspora. So this definition doesn't say anything about nationality. And that is why the reports we have had since Article 3 cure is only geared towards our national diasporas. But we are losing, it's only 50%. Imagine that we harness the competencies of other diasporas, the historical diasporas. That is where we will not only look at the 20 million national diasporas that we see out there, we will be looking at 230 million other diaspora that are waiting to come to the table with skills, with money, with capacities, with infrastructure, as well as other talents to make sure that we can meet our development agenda. So instead of going to countries in Europe looking for a partnership where they will then give, let's find a way how we get to the 230 million that will be able to play the strategic diplomacy that we are talking about. So that is where we need an institution for change. And the only place we can do that is this same hall that we are sitting here, the Pan-African Parliament, because once the Pan-African Parliament was created, the Article 3 cure of the Constitutive Act was also ignited. But ECOSOC 20 years ago, Pan-African Parliament 20 years ago came up. But the 6th region was the only part that was the troublesome out there, because sometimes we spend a lot of time looking at our national diasporas and forgetting about the historical diaspora. But the good news is, this is the first time in history that we have more black billionaires in the world out there. This is the first time in history that in European Parliament, from the job that we did, we made sure that young Africans in Europe get into Parliament, decide the laws. This is the first time that you could count 100 to 200 of Africans in parliaments and taking decisions. They are not only onlookers, but they are active. This is the first time that in all of the different parts of the world, you will find many Africans in skills, in leadership positions, and only waiting that the continent should create the necessary mechanism for them to come up. So, Madam Chair, I believe that if we bring the Pan-African Parliament, where it provides the platform where both comes together, we'll be able to carry out the magic. And here is the magic. We have seen in the past year that the diasporas has played a vital role in a community process, and with those positioning that they have been there, they are capable of influencing the law. They are capable of bringing the projects. They are capable of creating that jobs that we need to create in the continent so that our children and children of our children do not live and look for greener pasture through the deserts and only to be dehumanized. So we need to make sure that as we look for bridge builders, the diaspora's diplomacy, we need to look at it from a different, multiple angles. The lobbies, of course, we have been doing that. We have examples here today where I always give this example, in order for the German government to be able to send back the remains of the Herreros in Germany, it was not the state diplomacy that did that. It was the diasporas that used the soft diplomacy, because we are citizens of European countries there. We told them that it is not the dignity of the European and Germans to keep these artifacts and to keep the remains. You have to send it back. And we went back and talked to the ambassadors that, hey, look, you will be called for a meeting at the presidency and tell them we are ready to receive it. And that is why the magic was done. So we need the soft diplomacy, because as citizens of these countries, we love the continent and Africa is in us. So we need to make sure we create those mechanisms so we can get it. So we need reparations ambassadors. Yes, we need not just cultural ambassadors, sports ambassadors, and so on. We need to get reparation ambassadors who can talk the talk, walk the walk, and finance the process. So I think that PAP has to make sure, together with CEDAW and other commissions, that we identify the right people to be able to do this. So we have to build awareness. Of course, talking about reparation, we don't even know. People in the continent do not even know about the diasporas. So, Madam Chair, let me show you guys a definition that my dear sister Angela brought in here that was so perfect. So imagine the African diaspora still was defined as people of African origin, independent of their current origin, living outside the continent. Because of that definition incomplete, many diasporas packed their bags and rush to the continent that the Africa is calling for us. And you know the stories. In Tanzania, in Cameroon, everywhere, they tell you after 3 months, 90 days, you have to go back. And they are living in limbo. So we now, as the High Council, decided to enlarge this definition. And the definition that we asked the Pan-African Parliament to do this is to say that the African diasporas consist of people of African origin living outside the continent, or returnees currently in the continent without permanent residence or citizenship in African country, irrespective of their citizenship and nationality, who are willing to contribute to the development of the continent and building of a united and integrated Africa and diasporas. So, Madam Chair, this definition will make sure that those diasporas that are in limbo, they are here, they have nothing, they are not received, that they can be given a space. So I've already been, so this is the thing that we can do. We will lobby, we have given you example, the Dutch apology, we can do that, the Namibia, the Cameroon restitution of facts, the Beninese Browns, and the returnees. We will be able to bring the money, not just the money itself, but we'll be able to make sure that as we do our retirements, we'll take our money and bring it. As Donald Trump is asking that Americans for Americans, let's create the mechanism that the Africans can go back to, and when they know you can go to any African continent, any African country and invest and stay and create opportunities, then we will be able to make sure that we can build stronger. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. So we are begging that let the Article 3 cure campaign continue. Let us push for ratification of Article 3 cure. Let us make sure that a diaspora committee is put in the House so that we can sit down together in the Pan-African Parliament and discuss with the diasporas, because the diaspora process is a partnership. The African Union and the Pan-African Parliament can never go and organize the diaspora. The diasporas organize themselves, and we meet on the Pan-African Parliament, and everybody defending its position to build a united and integrated Africa. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, Dr. Kennedy. Portanto, não vou repetir aquilo que já disse, mas apenas eu queria realçar que realmente é preciso uma mudança de paradigma em relação, portanto, dos Estados-membros com a nossa diáspora. É fundamental o desenvolvimento da diplomacia da diáspora. E hoje nós temos, portanto, orgulho de dizer que temos uma diáspora de luxo. Hoje nós podemos contar com a estratégia da nossa diáspora para o desenvolvimento sustentável do nosso continente nos diversos setores de desenvolvimento. O que é preciso é cimentarmos a confiança na nossa diáspora e a prova disso, nós tivemos em dezembro o Parlamento, a senhora comissária, conselheira do Presidente da Comissão da União Africana, o Parlamento antecipou aquilo que é a campanha. Nós, em dezembro, já estávamos a falar da justiça e reparação em Senegal, no início de dezembro, e envolvemos a diáspora, a comunicação social. Por isso, hoje nós temos cá, no Parlamento, a nossa diáspora para falarmos do tema do ano, já com conhecimento da causa, porque o Parlamento fez esse trabalho. E é claro que nós temos que mudar de paradigma em relação à nossa juventude. É preciso cimentar a confiança na nossa juventude. Os Estados-membros deverão ter políticas apropriadas que permitam que a nossa juventude, quando vai estudar, regresse ao país para dar o contributo para o desenvolvimento do país. E nós apelamos à nossa diáspora que seja investidor no país. Portanto, nós não queremos que a nossa diáspora seja apenas um emissor de remessa. A remessa é bom porque contribui para, portanto, o aumento da receita e o crescimento do PIB, mas é preciso que a nossa diáspora também seja visto como um investidor. Nós não podemos estar a criar condições para os estrangeiros investirem no nosso país e, ao mesmo tempo, negligenciar-se com a nossa diáspora. Portanto, é preciso que os Estados-membros também criem condições, criem pacotes de incentivos para que a nossa diáspora venha investir no nosso continente. Sem mais delongas, vou passar a palavra ao Dr. Baril Biekeman para fazer o uso da palavra e falar, portanto, em nome da 6ª Região e do Conselho Superior. Muito obrigada. Tenha bondade.
That take 20 until 30 minutes.
No, it's not possible.
I decide to turn on to do something else. And if you want to have my presentation, then the Bureau has it, and my PowerPoint presentation is also at the Bureau. So, what shall someone do if he is before a court and he has to defend herself? we are now in a house of the politics. And you know what I like from this house? Is that in fact, the whole African Union is here. It's in this house. Because I consider the Pan-African Parliament as a house of politicians that belongs to an African Union country. And of course, we need member states. We need sovereign states. For instance, the CARICOM. And you have also hear from our Dr. Tumenta Kennedy that the African Union 6 Region High Council is a governance structure. Because the African diaspora, we live, for instance, in Europe, we don't have a black government. And we know that the African Union is dealing with governments. That's why they have MOU with CARICOM. And that's why they are dealing with a lot of African diaspora organizations. And that's why it is that the modality that we create is a model that we have all the diaspora at the table. Not sovereign states, but diaspora states. And when we talk about reparatory justice, you must realize that if you talk within the perspective of government, and you leave the diaspora, the community, the masses behind, who face racism every day, you must realize that this is very important, and we have a law on that the civil society has a space. Also, Pan-Africanist, a lot of Pan-Africanist organization, reparation movement is very big. More than 100 reparation movements. More than 100, maybe 500. Only in Europe we count 200. And where are the perpetrators? The perpetrators are in Europe. I'm from Europe. So, Sister Angela, you know, you need us. Mama Adwa, you need us. The African Union needs us. Because we knows where the archives are. We knows where the archives are. We knows the archives, and we can see in the archive the shippings. You know, the shippings, all the shippings, where they come from. And we can speak about ethnocide, what it means in Europe. So, if I have to talk about 10 minutes, it is very important for the Pan-African Parliament, I may not look there, the Pan-African Parliament, that you have a commission on civil society and diaspora. Sister Angela, Article 3Q of the Constitutive Act is in fact a strategy of self-repair. Because we can look at the Europe, or the Western nations who committed these crimes, but we have an article, I think Article 163 and 65, in the Durban Declaration and the Program of Action, that said that at the one side, they give direction to the perpetrators. At the other side, for instance, they speak about the right of return and what the African Union should do, or the countries that that suffer on colonialism, what they can do. So, if you talk about Article 3Q of the Constitutive Act, we talk about the Pan-African, I think that the ECOSOC and the Pan-African Parliament were the two first organizations or mechanisms that declared the African diaspora as to be part of the continent. And still we have people that are traveling to Africa to invest, to live, find a living there. After 3 months, they have to leave the country because of the visa problem. So where are you going to start when we talk about reparations? We have also reparations. We have several aspects of reparation. One is self-reparations, self-repair. That is in the comprehensive strategy that we put here. So where are we going to start? With the Pan-African Parliament, for instance. We have the whole African Union is in the Pan-African Parliament because of the politicians, because of the parliamentarians. So, Sido, Sister Angela, where are we going to start? If we talk about education is important, but if we take it from perspective of government, then I think that the African Continental Free Trade Area don't have a protocol. Don't have a protocol that makes space for the diaspora. So I want you to think about that we can have nice, my PowerPoint presentation has not presented. But these are the things that I have also put in the PowerPoint presentation. And it is very important that we recognize the diaspora also in Europe. Because they are looking, you see, the head of states of the African Union is traveling to CARICOM, Barbados, with head of states, they are talking, while we are sitting and looking and watching. So, the African Union 6th Region High Council has created, and we walk with our ancestors, the Guyans, like Dudley Thompson, for instance, since the Durban Conference, where I was, where there, the African Union ministers of foreign affairs, they were there, we speak, we talk with them, and because of them, there is where it built, the consciousness built, that we have an Article 3Q of the African Union Constitutive Act. And then in 2012, how many minutes? One. Oh, I make it half. And you can realize, you can imagine what it costs that until today, these Western countries don't accept the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. There is no political will. And to conclude, let me ask ourselves why we have a decade for people of African descent, 2015 until 2024, and we have now a second decade. It is only to realize the political will. The political will. So I rest my case.
We need the presentation.
Muito obrigada, doutora Behril, pela apresentação da estratégia da diáspora em relação à reparação, mas também por ter insistido naquilo que deverá ser a relação do Parlamento Pan-Africano com a diáspora. Eu sei que está, tanto como a doutora como o Dr. Kennedy estão sempre a insistir na criação de uma comissão do caucus da diáspora aqui no Parlamento Pan-Africano. Tomamos a boa nota e vamos, portanto, analisar e ver como é que nós poderemos, portanto, ter uma representação da diáspora a nível do Parlamento Pan-Africano. Nós, antes de entrarmos na apresentação, aliás, no debate, eu queria apelar aos técnicos, ao secretariado, para partilhar a apresentação dos diferentes oradores que foram aqui através do PowerPoint, para poder, portanto, facilitar a intervenção dos colegas deputados, portanto, a doutora Behril já autorizou a disponibilização da sua apresentação a todos os participantes, pelo que não vou falar sobre aquilo que ela tanto aqui partilhou conosco. Peço ao secretariado que faça essa partilha do ficheiro para os deputados. E antes de abrirmos o debate e para também sermos justos com os nossos convidados, a nossa diáspora, como eu disse, temos uma diáspora muito rica e uma diáspora inteligente. E então eu queria convidar, portanto, o Dr. Kalu, que é o ponto focal da diáspora na União Africana, para em 2 minutos partilhar conosco a sua visão sobre esta matéria. Eu sei que a sua capacidade síntese vai permitir fazer isso em 2 minutos. Tenha bondade.
Yep, okay. Well, all protocol observed, I understand I only have 2 minutes, so I'm not going to try to exceed that. I'm just going to stand on existing protocol. Macaulay Kalu, AU 6th region, and also the ACAS Economic Community Africa 6th region, and also a member of the 6+2 on the diaspora focal point on the CEDAW. Now, my colleagues have said a lot already, but a few things based on some of the comments that I made. I think it's important, based on what we're talking about today, that the diaspora do have a seat or be properly engaged within the Pan-African Parliament. I think that will help a lot in the conversation moving forward. And I also want to draw attention to something that is happening that I believe, with the extension of the decade of people of African descent, and the African Union now taking this year also based on reparative justice. Now, I think it's an important time to join force together in achieving the goal that we want with the Global North. Now, we in Canada, we actually got the Canadian Prime Minister, January 30th, 2018, to actually acknowledge the decade and make apologies for the injustices that have been done to people of African origin. And I think, to me, that could be a real starting point of engagement on pointing what the Prime Minister has said, and also even their commitment financially in addressing the injustices and racial situations in the Americas. As a matter of fact, within the Commission, Canada is sharing that commission within the UN. Bob Bray is chairing that within the United Nations from Canada, and I think we can take advantage of that in doing that. But another key thing as we talk about reparation is also to point out, as we talk about the aspect of the diaspora engagement, it's also the value that we need to look at transitional justice. Because transitional justice is important, that we keep the house in order in the continent as we also address the reparative issues. Even acknowledging, what has happened with the transatlantic slavery, maybe acknowledging a memorial site, which would be a key thing in also addressing these issues that from the transitional justice process, that we acknowledge what has happened, and also addressing the memories of what happened based on transatlantic slavery and also the colonial system as well. Now, another thing that we think that will help within this period, that I believe the Pan-African Parliament can help in the process of what we're doing, is also still addressing the issues that diasporas are having concerning citizenship. Because the aspect of citizenship is interesting, that we go to the diaspora, we become citizens of America and US and all that, but now when we do that, we are being alienated or cut off as becoming citizens of where we come from. And so the aspect of being a diaspora is not to be that we are foreigners to where we belong. We are part of the global Africa family, and I believe that the Pan-African Parliament could help member states to look at the aspect of the citizenship as we address these issues, because the diasporas are ready to engage and to come back home. And so I believe that these points, as we continue the conversations and engagements of what we're talking about the diaspora, you know, we are doing what we can from the diaspora perspective in establishing and supporting the Pan-African networks within the diaspora to structure ourselves within the global diaspora framework. And also, I think if we can support what the African Union have done, even in the framework that was just accepted within the ECOSOC process, in the journey of the 20 seats to be occupied within the ECOSOC, I think that's a segue in moving forward, that if we all can join force and support what CEDAW is already doing. One might not understand the challenges that we're going through within the structure and the CEDAW, but I think that if we can support based on what we heard and the presentations and what CEDAW is doing already, and supporting that, and every body collectively collaborating and partnering together in doing what needs to be done, and of course the Office of the Chairperson as well, with the work already being done, if we can be intentional in addressing these things, I believe that we'll be able to move forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Muito obrigada pela sua capacidade de síntese e também por trazer contributos que vão enriquecer o nosso debate, nomeadamente a questão da nacionalidade. Portanto, resposta sobre a cidadania, nós como parlamentares poderemos dar esse contributo a nível dos Estados-membros, trabalhar na legislação de acesso à nacionalidade, portanto, para as várias gerações, para poder permitir que a nossa diáspora desta geração tenha, desta e das gerações futuras tenham, portanto, nacionalidade e não sejam tratados como estrangeiros nos seus próprios, portanto, países ou continente, neste caso, portanto, estamos a falar da nossa descendência africana. E obrigado por ter partilhado connosco a experiência e a visão americana, portanto, o que é que está sendo feito a nível do Canadá para a reparação, e eu acho que isso poderia também servir de exemplo aos outros que devem fazer o pedido de desculpa e criar meios para a compensação e a reparação da justiça que é devido aos africanos e à sua descendência. Nós estamos com um problema realmente do tempo. Temos mais 2 apresentadores, portanto, isso aqui, que será do painel seguinte. Não sei se a plenária pretende que nós façamos o debate desses 4, fechar o primeiro painel, depois abrir o segundo, ou se vamos apresentar o segundo painel e fazer um único debate. Portanto, eu gostaria de ouvir 2 pessoas só para podermos orientar e seguir o trabalho. A questão que eu estou a colocar é o seguinte: podemos fazer a apresentação do painel 2, que faltam 2 apresentadores, e fazer um debate no final, ou então iniciar agora o debate do primeiro painel. Gostaria de ouvir 2 sugestões para podermos tomar a decisão correta. Obrigada.
Yeah, I'm proposing that we do debate on this first panel. Time will be limited to each members. Then we go to the second part of it.
Senhora Presidenta, eu penso que deveríamos terminar esse painel, fazer a discussão e depois avançamos para o próximo.
Muito obrigada pelas vossas sugestões. Portanto, vamos então seguir agora com o debate do primeiro painel. Tivemos 5 apresentadores. Vai ser 1 minuto para cada deputado. Eu sei que os deputados nós gostamos de falar, mas vamos tentar ser o mais breve possível para permitir, portanto, a contribuição de todos e depois permitir também aos apresentadores do segundo painel fazer a apresentação. Como eu disse, temos um constrangimento, vamos ter corte de energia daqui a pouco, então vamos ser breve. Passo a palavra ao colega deputado de Gâmbia.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. today is a very important day as far as reparation is concerned, and Black History Month, because this month is referred to as Black History Month. Madam Speaker, reparation, restitution, diaspora issue, I really want to comment on the presenters. They have done justice to the cause. And it's high time we talk about these issues and find solutions to it. Talking is enough now. It's time for action. Citizenship, those from diaspora, when they come here, they have a challenge to be integrated to our society. So I think it's high time we look at model laws that will be adopted by countries to look at the citizenship. Some countries, like my country, 15 years before you are recognized as a citizen. That's too long. Ghana, they have done well. Ghana, the integration in Ghana, I think is a model that we all need to visit and look at it. Honorable Speaker, the security of diaspora is very key. If somebody comes from diaspora, want to invest in Africa, the governments must make sure that they are secure. People cannot come here, they are killed in their own, in their own historical birthplace, because of what? So there is no security, and they want to invest. People cannot invest when there is no security. So the governments must be responsible and make sure that every citizen is protected. Now, talking about the different form of diasporas, the historical diasporas or the socio-economic migrant diasporas, I think there should be a common unity among these diasporas. I want to put this question to you, particularly those who made presentation and they are from America or Canada. What is your relationship with the newest form of diasporas that leave our continent because of education or economic reason? What is your relationship with them? Because you have to accept each other, you have to love each other. So if you don't entertain each other, you don't love each other, how do you expect the brotherlyhood to happen? So Africans must love each other, whether in and out of the continent. How many of our citizens are killed in Germany? Up to now, justice is not done. How many of our young Africans are behind the bars in Europe? Do you find time to go and see these people? Do you talk about it? Because the human rights abuse is a human rights abuse. Injustice is a threat to justice anywhere. Thank you, ma'am.
Muito obrigado, eu agradeço a colaboração. Passo a palavra à colega deputada Arlete, da Angola. Vamos tentar fazer um deputado por cada país, não vamos passar, portanto, 2 ou 3 deputados do mesmo país. Eu peço a compreensão da colega deputada de Gâmbia. Vamos fazer um por país para permitir os outros países participarem, por favor. Obrigada.
Obrigada, Senhora Presidente. Eu vou tentar cumprir com 1 minuto. Primeiro, para dar os parabéns aos 5 apresentadores, e que foi fundamentalmente falar da diáspora. E eu queria ouvir, se possível, algum comentário sobre algumas sugestões que vou aqui fazer. Por exemplo, a compensação econômica e a restituição dos bens. Da vossa prática, o levantamento que fizeram, o que é possível, em termos de diáspora, haver compensação de bens, compensação econômica e restituição de bens. E estou a falar praticamente na restituição dos artefactos, que tem que ser a nível diplomático e onde a diáspora pode ter um papel muito influente porque sabe exatamente onde estão, como são. O cancelamento da dívida externa da África. Isto já é uma questão um bocadinho mais forte, mas é possível que os países que beneficiaram fundamentalmente com a escravidão e com todos esses atos africanos, nós em África temos alguns problemas de saúde, de infraestrutura, mas continuamos com uma dívida externa muito alta. O que é possível fazer, ou se é possível fazermos o cancelamento e ajudarmos no cancelamento desta dívida externa? Reformas políticas e inclusão afrodescendente. De vossos dados, daquilo que vocês têm tratado em termos de diáspora, incluir os afrodescendentes com políticas novas para ter um trabalho mais efetivo em relação a estas questões. E, por último, o reconhecimento oficial e compromissos internacionais. Como nós podemos incluir a diáspora? Que dados é que vocês têm palestrantes sobre o que é possível em termos de reconhecimento oficial para, principalmente, os países responsáveis como falou um dos palestrantes, sobre o tráfico transatlântico. E como disse o meu colega que me antecedeu, eu acho que é o tempo da ação. Temos que começar não só com discursos, mas sim ação, porque nós somos parlamentares africanos e neste momento estamos aqui a representar o povo africano, portanto nós podemos ter um papel também bastante ativo. Obrigada.
Obrigada, senhora deputada. Agora passo a palavra ao deputado Fagnon, de Benin.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Chers collègues, chers présentateurs, je vais directement partager avec vous l'expérience de mon pays, le Bénin, l'ancien Dahomey, qui a été le chantre de la traite négrière, et vous dire que sous l'impulsion du président de la République, Patrice Talon, en 2016, il a fait la démarche, il a fait la demande de la restitution de 26 trésors royaux. On a pu les récupérer en 2021. 2. Le Parlement béninois a voté une loi qui a été promulguée en septembre 2024, que nous appelons loi panafricaniste, parce que cette loi octroie la nationalité et la citoyenneté béninoise à tous les afro-descendants de l'Afrique subsaharienne. 4 plutôt, il y a une nomination d'un ambassadeur. Monsieur Georges a été nommé ambassadeur pour faire le tandem entre le Bénin, les Antilles et les CARICOM. Et 4, il y a eu une première réunion des ministres des Affaires étrangères des États membres des Caraïbes dans mon pays le 8 janvier dernier. Et cette réunion a réuni l'ensemble des ministres représentant 85% des territoires. Chers collègues, la dynamique doit continuer et moi, je m'interroge sur les dispositions, la stratégie que nous comptons prendre au sein du Parlement panafricain pour que nous puissions jouer un rôle dynamique afin que, à l'instar du Ghana, de mon pays et d'autres pays certainement, que toute l'Afrique soit emballée dans cette dynamique unique pour constituer un front, pour défendre la cause justement des afro-descendants qui doit parler le même langage. Il y a l'Afrique, il y a la diaspora, dans les termes définis par les décennies de l'Union africaine et de l'ONU. Merci beaucoup.
Muito obrigada, senhor deputado. Passa a palavra à senhora deputada Esther, de Quênia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, for giving me this opportunity. Before I make my contribution towards the reparation, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf for winning the recent elections as the chair of the AUC, Her Excellency Ambassador Selma Malika, her body, and the 4 commissioners elected to the position of AU Commission elections. Now, when we talk of reparation, what do we have as Africa to hold the global north to account? We might think we have nothing, and we feel weak when we ask for compensation for things that were done wrong to us. And while we deal with reparations for the global north and all the colonial masters that did the wrongs that they did to Africa, the continent of Africa, whose families probably are going to forget if we don't bring this history up and deal with it decisively. Have countries been compensated for reparation? Yes. Germany paid reparation to the Holocaust victims, their heirs, and the State of Israel. Germany also paid reparations to Namibia for the Herero-Naima genocide. Well, it's documented that they did, and if they didn't, then I guess we have to look into that as well, because there were discussions, very deep discussions on reparation for Namibia. What I know is that when we feel weak as a continent, we will never be able to get what we deserve, because we are already going to the table as people who are weak. But is Africa weak? Everybody talks about Africa as this continent with all the raw materials that the West wants. They want our minerals, they want our youth, they want our agricultural products, they want a lot. Even right now, when it comes to saving the globe, Africa is seen to be the least in terms of emissions, 4%, and yet it's suffering the biggest brunt when it comes to climate change. So what do we have that can actually bring them to their knees? We have the debt. The debt that they have given us at very high prices, very high interest rates. It's another form of colonialism that I think Africa should sit together and be united on that front. When it comes to our minerals, they cannot run their countries without our minerals. But are we prepared as the continent of Africa, and this is the challenge to the new leadership, are we prepared to actually sit on the same table, put our differences aside, and recognize that we first need to address the various wars that we have in our continent? We need to silence the guns. DRC, we say it's the breadbasket of Africa. It has the minerals to sustain Africa, but yet we sit and watch the DRC crumble. We've got the Sudan, okay? And we've got so many other places that we know in Africa. The guns need to be silenced, but not only silenced. We need to come with a unity of purpose, a unity that Africa speaks with one voice, that all the leaders put their differences aside and remember that they are brothers. Irrespective of our religious backgrounds, irrespective of our tribes, irrespective of our gender, we need to come together with one agenda. And what is that one agenda? To make sure that Africa gets the reparation that it needs. And the only way we're going to do that is through unity of purpose. The prosperity of Africa depends on our unity. Are we prepared to be unified as a continent to be able to take what is rightfully ours in terms of reparation? Thank you, Madam President.
Muito obrigada. Vamos fechar a inscrição deste painel. Portanto, fechamos aqui com o deputado Cassingo. Antes disso, vou passar ao colega deputado. Penso daqui não estou a ver bem, acho que é da Tunísia. Sim, ok. Tenha a verdade.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. محمد سقراس من الجزائر وليس من تونس. إخواننا تونس أحبائنا. أولا أقول أن الموضوع هذا موضوع مهم جدا، وأنا يهمني ويهم بلدي أكثر لأننا دولة تعرضنا إلى الاحتلال لمدة قرن و32 سنة عاث فيها المستعمر فسادا، تقتيل وتهجير وسلب للمقدرات وتلويث للبيئة وكل ذلك. لكن أول ما لفت انتباهي فأعذروني على هذه الملاحظة أن الذين قدموا المداخلات كلهم تحدثوا عن الشتات، أظن أنه ربما أهل الشتات والمهجر يحتاجون فقط تعويض معنوي، لعلي أكون مخطئا، لأنهم يعيشون أفضل من يعيشون في القارة. هذه ملاحظتي الأولى. أما فيما يخص الذين يعيشون في القارة، أتساءل كثيرا، يعني هنا تساؤلات كيف سيكون رغم ما قدم من عروض، أتساءل هل إلى ما مدى إمكانية التعويض، ما مدى إمكانية أننا نحصل على هذه التعويضات؟ كيف ستعوض دول؟ هناك دول أبيد أهلها، كيف ستعوضهم؟ هناك دول مقدراتها استنزفت لقرون، كيف ستعوض هذا؟ ثم إذا كان فرضا استطعنا أن نضع قوانين صارمة وكذا يعني قابلة للتنفيذ، الدول القوية هي التي ستنفذ. نحن نعرف في التاريخ فقط احنا عندنا دولة واحدة نعرف أنها عوضت، هذا على حد معلوماتي، وهو الكيان الصهيوني الذي عوض من ظلموا من أهله في المحرقة المزعومة، محرقة الهولوكوست. فالوحيد الذين عوضوا من طرف ألمانيا. لماذا؟ لأنها فقط دولة مستعمرة، ألمانيا كانت دولة مستعمرة، وكيان الصهيوني دول مستعمرة. هؤلاء يتفقون فيما بينهم، يساندون بعضهم البعض. أما أن دول مستعمرة تعوض دول استعمرتها، هذا والله صراحة أراه بعيد المنال وصعب التجسيد. عن ماذا سيعوضون؟ عن العبودية، عن الرق، عن الاستنزاف المقدرات. ناميبيا أبيد كل، ألمانيا أبدت كل شعبها، لماذا لا تعوضها يعني ناميبيا على 75% من شعبها الذي قتل؟ الجزائر ضحينا ب7 ملايين جزائري قتلوا في سبيل الحصول على استقلالهم، يعني كيف سيعوض هؤلاء؟ يعني أستغرب صراحة. المقدرات التي استنزفت من إفريقيا، من الكونغو الديمقراطية، ما زالت لحد الآن تستنزف على كل حال بطريقة أو بأخرى، أو بشكل آخر. إذن المسألة تحتاج صراحة عزيمة، وصراحة تحتاج تضامن كبير من دول إفريقيا للحصول على حقوقها. الجزائر قد نادت في السابق يعني في كثير من المرات بضرورة التعويض هذا عن نخر. هذه الدول لا يمكنها أن تعوضنا بهذه السهولة، ونحن فقط كنا نطالب فرنسا مثلا أنها تعترف بجرائمها، فقط اعتراف بجرائمها، ولم نحصل على هذا الاعتراف، فما بالك بالتعويض؟ إذن فهذه الأمور صراحة هو مسعى جيد سنسعى إليه بكل قوتنا، لكن يحتاج جدية وتحتاج تضامن كبير من بين الدول الإفريقية لتحقيق هذا المسعى. وشكرا.
Muito obrigada. Antes de passar a deputada Cassinga, eu vou passar a colega deputada de Gâmbia. Tens 1 minuto para fazer a sua intervenção. Obrigada.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Madam President, what I would like to say, I think it is a good initiative. It means very well. But how fruitful is this going to be? Because first of all, I would ask us, are we responsible enough to ask for reparations when what we are doing to our citizens currently in some countries is sometimes worse than what we went through in colonialism? Last week, I was speaking in my country, and I did say that what some of our countries are going through is worse or near worse to what we went through during colonialism. They say that they want transparency, accountability, and good governance. I think before we go and start asking for reparations, we should put our house in order, make sure that we practice good governance, make sure that we are accountable to our citizens, make sure that we are transparent to our citizens. Because if you have our current leaders living lavishly while people in the villages are crying to make ends meet, even to have a square meal is a problem. How can we, especially also when we also depend on the aid that is given to the West, I think we should put the aid aside, refuse aid if we are going to ask for reparation, and focus on reparation. I totally support the means of asking for our artifacts back, because those are ours. We need them, but if we start comparing talk about Versailles Treaty, if we start talking about the Holocaust compensation, I think we would have lost it. Thank you.
Muito obrigada. Passo agora a palavra à deputada Cassingo, por favor.
Yeah, thank you, Your Excellency the President, for giving me the floor. While I agree with the previous, I have to thank the presenters, and I have also to agree with my fellow MPs from Benin, from Kenya, from Algeria, for what they said. I'm from Namibia, and Namibia, as we have heard, is one of the country which has experienced the West genocide. And through tough negotiation, the Namibian government has succeeded to get some of the artifacts from Germany, but not all of them. But however, I have just to share with you, colleague, to say that these people who have colonized us and who have committed genocide, it was, for example, in the case of Namibia, it was very difficult to convince the Germans to say apology. Of current, the government of Republic of Namibia and the German, they are still negotiating of the type of reparation. It's not yet concluded. I just want to put it on record that we didn't get anything. With what I said, I would just like to know if we talk about reparations, as it was highlighted by the other colleague from Algeria, what type of reparation are we talking about? Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada, senhora deputada. Nós temos apenas 15 minutos para o corte da energia. Como não houve questão, foram apenas comentários, vou passar a palavra ao colega presidente da Comissão da Justiça e Direitos Humanos para introduzir o segundo tema e passar diretamente, portanto, aos apresentadores para podermos ser justos com os apresentadores que estão à nossa espera antes do corte da energia. Portanto, senhor presidente, a palavra é sua. Obrigada.
Ok, merci de m'accorder la parole. Sans trop tarder, je vais inviter les panélistes. Les deux qui sont présents dans la salle doivent venir ici, de l'autre côté. Puis nous allons inviter la technique de connecter les deux autres. Donc ici, nous avons en présentiel honorable Dr Lita. Et aussi, nous avons Dr Justice Alfred de l'Université de Cape Town. Donc, ils sont invités ici au panel. Mais je demande de diligence à ce que nous puissions commencer par la personne en ligne, Monsieur Keretue Osei, Head of Programs ECOSOC. Si il nous entend, il peut commencer à intervenir. 5 minutes. Vous avez chacun 5 minutes. Ah, je vois la ligne France. En ligne, je vois France qui... Vous avez 5 minutes.
5 minutes is 5 or 10? Your Excellencies, all protocols observed. I do not know where to start because we have so much to share about the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, where we even have best practices. But allow me to say that when you speak last, sometimes people say what you'd have said, but in our case, it hasn't happened. So I think I beg your indulgence, and I will need another 5 minutes. I want to say that we have been asked to present on legal and political frameworks for reparations, which I would like to approach from the African Commission on Human People's Rights perspective, highlighting both hard law instruments, conventions, treaties, domestic laws, and decisions of the policy organs of the AU, as well as soft instruments adopted by the continental and international institutions. A speaker before me gave the historical context where she said that we do know that reparations have been paid in the past, the Jewish Holocaust victims, and I will skip that, but allow me to say a few things about reparations. We saw, after the Second World War, the Marshall Plan crafted by Europe to reconstruct Europe. And one can say maybe there's been discriminatory approach in the way the Western nations have approached reparations. Because in 2002, during the World Summit for Sustainable Development, we worked very hard to raise the issue of ecological reparations to bring about climate justice. That's over 20 years ago. And this was defeated. So really, if we want to talk about some of the experiences that we've had, Africa has gotten a raw deal. But that does not stop us. As clearly demonstrated by previous speakers, African Union has got a solid basis for seeking reparations for injustices committed against their citizens during slavery, colonialism, and in the current era of neocolonialism. We have witnessed massive plunder of our resources, as has been said before, environmental resources, illicit financial flows, and accumulation of unsustainable debt. Quickly, let me go to the legal political frameworks for reparations that have been put in place. I want to start with the AU Assembly Decision 847 of 2023, which was endorsed by the Accra Declaration. The decision of the Executive Council of the African Union is the second one, taken in July 2024, which adopted the concept note for the Plan of Action for the Year of Reparations 2025. The third one is International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, adopted way back in 1965 and entered into force in 1969. The Abuja Proclamation on Reparations is the fourth one. The Durban Declaration and Platform of Action is the fifth one. The Program of Activities of the Implementation of the International Decade for People of African Descent is the sixth, and the seventh is the resolution that was taken by the Commission on Human and People's Rights, Resolution 543 of 2022. Your Excellencies, I can talk very fast, but I don't think it is important. What is important here is to say what is at stake if we do not have reparations done properly. It's very important to say that on the four strands that have been identified, the three, under slavery, the Commission of Human and People's Rights has looked at unique ways of identifying the issue of abductions, forced disappearance of our people 400 years ago to a continent they didn't know. They were uprooted when our civilization was very young, and all that meant that our continent cannot grow. They went to other continents, they developed other continents. If you look at the inventions, and this is the February, if you look at some of the inventions that have been benefiting the West, most of them are from indigenous knowledge that was taken away from our continent. And in this I talk as a capacity, my capacity as the chair of the commission in charge of indigenous knowledge. So this knowledge has benefited other continents, built other continents, and we have not been able to be paid, and this is a huge source of reparation. The second one is that we are looking at the issue of just looking at the abductions and forced disappearance as a human rights issue. And we are hosting a roundtable next May, in which we are going to get the commissioner in charge of that mandate to see how we can capture the reparations that would be stemming out of just the abductions alone and the forced disappearance, because when you go to the Western literature, they don't capture that. And so that is our duty to do that and also place it as reparations. The issue of lost artifacts has been raised, but I want to say that we have not even started. As we stand here, our artifacts are sitting in museums in London, in Paris, and they're raising money every day through tourists, and these tourists are raising money that could be actually raised better in our continent. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I think I would like to acknowledge that when we were preparing our 81st session of the Commission, we decided to come up with a resolution to support the theme here. And in my capacity as a commissioner in charge of this portfolio, I was asked to be a focal point for this theme. I want to tell you one of the things that happened during that session. We had people from African diaspora who came to us. They told us that they had taken DNA tests. There were thousands and thousands of them, and that they were looking forward to being received in the countries where they come from. And it touched us because we realized that people know from which village their ancestors came from. People know their tribes. People know their ancestry. People know where they came from. And so what we decided to do as a best practice, and I think they should be captured in the final resolution. We, first of all, try to do a desk study to check which African countries have given African citizenry to their descendants. Ghana came on top, it had the highest number, followed by Sierra Leone and Guinea-Bissau. Based on that, we'll send letters of commendations to the 3 presidents from those countries, because we want that to serve as a best practice so that other countries in the continent can go ahead and do so. So what we did as a follow-up is we have written to all the permanent representative PRC members in Addis Ababa, and we've asked them to write to their capitals. So they are going to write to you to check how many citizens your countries have given to Afro-descendants. And once we get the statistics, we shall send them letters of commendation, and by the end of this year, we shall be able to tell the Assembly, so far, so many Afro-descendants have got citizenship, and they can come back. And we believe this should open way for us to be able to receive our brothers and sisters. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that 1 year is a very short time. I was involved in a similar situation in African Union Commission in my previous capacity, where we wanted to have 1 year to change gender equality in the continent, and we realized it doesn't happen. It requires minimum a decade. It is time that Africa has got its own decade, where we are not waiting for the UN to go and place our issues on the agenda, but we as Africa can agree during the decade, these are the issues of African descendants, these are the issues we need to do, and then we can be able to do justice. Before I sit down, I want to tell you one of the things that I have learned after working in the AU for over 20 years. In the AU, we have 5 regions, and every region has got an economic community. Every region has got a structure at the economic community level that participates in the summit. Every July, we have a meeting of regional economic communities where they come to report to the summit. Now, we have a 6th region, and we are leaving them alone. They are fragmented. They do not have what they need to do to be the proper 6th region. I think one of the things that this parliament can do is call for a proper 6th region and ask the Executive Council to come up with a decision that will give us, and that's how the decade comes in, to set up a proper economic commission for the 6th region, who can now operate the same way parameters as the other regions, RECs operate, who can report to our July summit what they are doing, and who, through their REC, can raise so much money that we do not need to go to China to be developed. We can go to our 6th region REC to get money for development. We do not have to go to Europe. I think the colleague who spoke before me here was saying that, oh, you know, we can look for Africans and let them contribute. We can bypass governments. That is not how institutions of the AU work like. So it is very easy, if you ask me, for us to just demand through a decision or a resolution that now that we are talking about the 6th region, let us just give it the same mandate, the same infrastructure, the same authority as the other regions have. And ladies and gentlemen, we will sit here 10 years later and we can be able to say this is what this 6th region has done, and this is what the 6th region is capable of doing. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, I do not think I can even go through my speech. I saw my sister speak off cuff. I tried, but I want to say that next time you invite an organ of the African Union, please give it enough time to share its experiences, to share its work, and to say how and what needs to be done. I thank you.
Sans trop tarder, comme le temps nous fait défaut, nous allons inviter Justice, à l'Université de Cape Town, pour faire sa présentation. Vous avez 7 minutes. Il m'a avoué que dans 6 minutes, il aura terminé, mais je lui ajoute 1 minute. Vous avez 7 minutes. You have 7 minutes.
Okay. All right, you can hear me. Yeah, I think I will take 5 minutes. Yeah, I thank you very much, Chair, and all protocols observed. I'm going to say who I am, not because I like you to know who I am, but I want to put some context to what I'm going to say. My name is Justice Mavetsenge. I am a professor of law at University of Cape Town. Most of the time I'm training judges. I've also done some training for some of the MPs, some of them they are here. Sometime last year I was invited, Honorable Chair, to come and speak on the theme of education. And I ended up, I think, getting 5 minutes or something like that. And the same thing has happened again. So I had a whole presentation on what the role of Parliament can be and the role of PAP can be in advancing the reparative justice agenda. I want to withdraw from that presentation and just talk about one thing that I think you should do. And unless you do that, my leaders, there will not be any reparations. And there will not be any development on our continent. So first and foremost, create time to have sufficient discussions on these issues. These are complex issues. Listening to some of the submissions, there's a lot of inaccurate information that is being shared, misinterpretation of concepts and so forth. But we, your children, we are here. And we have accepted to come and what? And support you. You are not paying us, it's voluntary. Right? As a lawyer, I'm paid for time. But I'm not charging you time by being here. Right? So if you ask me to speak for 5 minutes or 7 minutes, the impression I get is you are not taking this seriously. So I am going to say your role, right? Your role is to create time to actually listen to the experts and then discuss and ask issues from the experts. And then come up with a very solid program of action. I was invited by some of the people that I think are going to be our competitors in the reparations movement. And I saw how prepared they are to listen to their enemies. And I saw how thorough they are in discussing these issues. Honorable Chair, I don't think this is what we did here. That's my personal opinion. I could be wrong. So my presentation, and I end here, is create time that is enough for you to actually discuss this issue with the view of identifying practical steps to take and develop a plan. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, mais continuons à présenter nos excuses. Comme je l'avais dit, le temps n'était pas à notre... The time was not in our side. This is why... sans trop tarder, alors, je vais inviter France, Centre for Human Rights, University of Pretoria, online. Yeah, okay. 5 minutes. It is just to complete the presentation of legal and the political frameworks for reparations.
Thank you very much, Chair. I also will try to be very brief. I think my remarks complement those of Commissioner Lita. I commend her for pointing out the issue of forced disappearances and that requires attention. And I perhaps will link my remarks also to those of Justice by saying I will try to just focus on a few, if you like, nuts and bolts, some of the practicalities of working around achieving justice, not obviously to validate these challenges that I will bring out, but to help us to strategize in addressing those, as was pointed out. So clearly there are many, and it's a very complicated area. But let me say, Under international law, what is very clear is that this principle has emerged and it is set out in the draft articles on state responsibility, which is understood to set out what states can be responsible for. And it says that if a state has acted wrongfully and its actions have caused harm, then the state must provide reparations. That is the bottom line. That is a principle that has been accepted. But clearly, when we look at the issue of, for example, transcontinental enslavement of Africans, the operationalization, the practical way of dealing with this is casting difficulties. There are exceptions to this simple rule. The first one is that the state's actions and the harm must be linked to each other. The state must be attributed to, the harm must be attributed to the state. It must be that state. In other words, if we say we want to bring a case against a European state today, this contemporary state must be linked back to the state, the entity that existed in 16th or 17th century colonial times. I think that is not an unbridgeable concern because we have the principle of state succession. States are, under international law, responsible and therefore also accountable for actions that have been undertaken by the same state entity. The second issue is sometimes more problematic, and that is that what the unlawfulness constitutes is not what we see as unlawful today, but the action must have been unlawful under the law as it was at the time. So, for example, is it so that enslavement was a crime against humanity in the 16th and 17th century, when, in a sense, international law, as it stood, Eurocentric international law, colluded in upholding those very principles? So there is some debate, and I'm sure, again, we can engage in it, and it's not foreclosed. But I think I'm pointing this out to show, as I think Justice wanted us and challenged us to do, the complexities, and that we need to address those with appropriate concern. So in terms of the legal framework, the binding laws, yes, I think Commissioner Lita showed that there are few treaties. There are many soft law which norms are basically persuasive. The one treaty that had not really been mentioned is the African Charter. The African Charter in Article 21.2 says, in the case of spoliation, the dispossessed people shall have the right to lawful recovery of its property as well as adequate compensation. So that is one of the clearest statements about reparation for the dispossession of peoples. The problem obviously is that the African Charter only binds the states party to it, and the European states, perhaps they're mostly responsible, the United States, they are not parties to the African Charter. But I want to say that there are things that we in Africa can also do with our institutions to bolster Article 21.2. For example, I think the African Commission, for example, can adopt in this context a general comment that can reinforce the obligation on states to educate and to create historical records to support research on the issue of reparations as set out in the African Charter. We can also approach the African Court, for example, asking for an advisory opinion by the African Court that may not deal with African states only, but could include the accountability or responsibility of states beyond Africa. Even the Pan-African Parliament can formulate a well-crafted question and pose it to the African Court on Human and People's Rights. But let me conclude by saying the treaty that is applicable across the world mostly by most states ratified is CERD, as was pointed out, the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And clearly what is possible under CERD would be interstate complaints. An African state can bring a case against a state that is a state party to CERD, as has happened in the past, as we have seen before the International Court of Justice. Invoking systemic racial discrimination is the basis for the complaint. Individuals, for example, African in the diaspora, can also bring cases to state parties like European countries or the United States, which is even a state party to CERD. The other option that I want to highlight is that there also is International Court of Justice. although it is not a human rights court, we have seen that, for example, through the genocide cases, that the International Court of Justice can be used as a forum in which these issues can be vindicated, human rights issues, and interstate cases, again, can be brought on the collective basis. Even a group of states can bring a case against a group of states, for example, if these states agree. And the last point here, I think we should also look at the European Court of Human Rights, maybe of Justice as well. There is a rich possibility for Africans in the diaspora to, for example, who are located in those countries, to bring cases on the basis of the ancillary and relevant rights in European Convention. So I think I agree with the prior speakers that the justice aspect certainly needs more reflection. There are those who mobilize to counter these claims, and we have to do all we can to make the best possible arguments. I think it's not the whole picture, but it is certainly a part of the picture. This picture about accountability, the use of legal fora in order for these, links to justice. And thank you very much, Chair.
Comme on nous a ajouté quelques 5 minutes pour éteindre parce que on est en train d'utiliser les moyens de bord pour l'électricité avec le délestage et autres problèmes que découlent. Je me tiens ici pour présenter encore une fois mes excuses au nom du Parlement panafricain parce que les experts, comme vous l'avez entendu, ont présenté l'indignation au fait qu'ils n'ont pas eu le temps de présenter en long et en large le sujet d'une grande importance, mais on les informerait que c'est le thème de l'année. Donc les présentations, ce n'est pas pour aujourd'hui seulement. Aujourd'hui, c'était pour rafraîchir notre mémoire, parce que c'est le thème de l'année. Car dans les autres sessions, nous espérons qu'il y aura du temps pour débattre de ce sujet combien important pour notre continent. Comme vous avez vu, la feuille de route est longue. Il y a d'autres travaux qui continueront avec les autres. Sans trop tarder alors, j'aimerais vous dire qu'en tant que parlementaire, en tant que représentant du peuple, nous devons nous engager à être les porte-flambeaux de cette cause, la justice à travers des réparations. Nous devons nous unir en tant que continent et diaspora pour exiger ce qui nous revient de droit. Les réparations ne sont pas une aumône, elles sont une justice. Elles sont la connaissance de notre souffrance, la restauration de notre dignité et le socle d'un avenir où l'Afrique occupe une place égale sur la scène mondiale. Nous devons donc, nous tous, agir en urgence, avec unité, avec une détermination inébranlable. Que vive l'Afrique, vive l'esprit de justice et de réparation. Je vous remercie. Et c'est sur ce que je déclare close la conférence sur le thème de l'année Justice pour tous les Africains et les descendants à travers des réparations. Mais aussi, je communique que le communiqué final, qui n'a pas eu le temps, sera dans votre plateforme. À tout à l'heure, vous aurez le communiqué final dans vos emails. Vous allez l'enrichir pour sauver du temps. C'est comme ça que nous avons pu procéder pour que nous puissions être dans le bon du temps qui nous a été imparti avant la coupure d'électricité. Je vous remercie. Je remercie tout le monde, mais aussi les interprètes là-bas qui ont dépassé leur temps, qui étaient dans le programme. Parce qu'en voyant le programme, des fois, on planifie d'autres choses. Nous tenons alors à nous excuser, mais aussi pour les experts, les visiteurs, tout le monde. Nous présentons nos excuses pour le dépassement du temps. Que Dieu vous bénisse. Je vous remercie.
Monsieur le Président,